All right, well, also tomorrow, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is setting the stage for debate on his party's motion. The non-binding motion calls on MPs to support a bitumen pipeline to the BC coast and adjustments to the tanker ban. And it uses quite similar, if not identical, language to the government's recent memorandum of understanding with the government of Alberta.
Liberal members on one side of the country are saying they're against, while they're pretending in Alberta that they are in favor. So why don't they stand up in the House of Commons, look Canadians in the eye, take one position, vote for a pipe to the Pacific?
The Prime Minister and all of us and all Conservative premiers and most people in this country supports every part of that MOU.
Andrew Scheer is the Conservative House Leader, and he joins me now. Mr. Scheer, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks very much for having me.
What do you hope to gain from getting the government to vote on this tomorrow? What does it do to advance the push for a pipeline?
Well, I believe Canadians deserve clarity. You know, we've got Mark Carney that goes out and dangles the possibility of a pipeline in Alberta, and then immediately comes back and starts to talk down expectations. You know, he says these are necessary but not sufficient to get it built. There's all kinds of Liberal MPs saying that they won't support it. If we ever got to the point of things like looking at the moratorium on tanker traffic, that would require some kind of change of legislation. So I think Canadians deserve to know exactly where this government stands. Mark Carney has made a practice now of saying one thing to one group of people. When he's in Alberta, he'll to say positive things about it, but when he goes to other places, he says things like, well, you know, the Premier of British Columbia gets a veto, and necessary but not sufficient, and all kinds of confusing language. So tomorrow's an opportunity for Liberals to just clearly state, do they support a pipeline to the Pacific so we can export more Canadian oil and gas overseas, yes or no?
But, well, I don't, the Prime Minister has not used the word veto. He did say in question period, BC government would need to approve. So that opens up.
So what happens if they don't?
No, I just want to quote him accurately. But these are not sufficient conditions yet for a pipeline, right? There's no proponent, there's been no consultation, there's no route, there's no Indigenous support. I mean, there is this MOU, but it is not at the sufficient stage, right?
Well, first of all, Mark Carney is becoming famous for this kind of Liberal wordplay where he says, oh, it's not a veto, but an approval is required. Well, we all know what happens when somebody is, when somebody says, well, somebody has to agree for it to proceed, well, then withholding that agreement is in effect a veto. He has not ever said that even if the British Columbia government opposed it, that he would approve it anyway. Secondly, to your point, first of all, there are, on the previous Northern Gateway project, I think it's important to kind of take a step back and say, how did we get here? Sure. On the previous Northern Gateway project, which would have opened up Asian markets to Canadian energy, there were lots of First Nations communities who would benefit and sign on to partnership agreements. What Mark Carney is saying when he says that these conditions are necessary but not sufficient, you're right, there's lots of things in the MOU that haven't happened yet, but what Mark Carney is saying that even if all these things happen, it still might not proceed. So that's why there's just so much confusion around here. There's no confusion from other political parties. Don Davies and the NDP, very clear. They do not support a pipeline. The Conservatives, very clear. We want a pipeline built to put men and women in the energy sector back to work and get off of U.S. dependence in terms of a market. The Liberals, all over the map, very confusing. We just believe Canadians deserve clarity.
So why would Mark Carney spend political capital and time to sign a deal with Daniel Smith, who has not been a fan of Liberal governments, as you're well aware? He had a high-profile resignation from Cabinet and former Minister Guilbeault, which is going to hurt him in parts of Quebec. The pipeline itself is an unpopular notion in the lower mainland of British Columbia, which could cost some seats to the New Democrats. And members of his Net Zero Advisory Committee have been resigning in protest of the rollback of environmental policy that's in this. Why would he do all of those things and take all of those hits if he wasn't serious about trying to get a pipeline to the Pacific coast?
Well, I believe that he understands that Canadians want to see some progress on this. Canadians overwhelmingly support exporting more of our oil and gas. Canadians definitely want to diversify our trading markets, but he doesn't believe in it himself. Remember, he wrote a book called Values, where he described himself on a very integral level, and he talked about his love of carbon taxes, his belief that we need to leave our natural resources in the ground. I mean, he talked about making people go through great hardship in the next few years. So I believe it's a case that, look, he can read the polls, he can see where the Canadian people are at, but he doesn't actually want to do it because he doesn't believe in it. So he's trying to do half measures. Now,
it's a lot of capital and effort to waste on something you don't want, though.
If I'm wrong, he could show up tomorrow and he can vote in favor of our motion and clearly say, I support a pipeline.
Right. Okay. Well, I want to play a clip. This is from a Calgary Liberal MP, Corey Hogan, who said that today that a yes or a no vote actually potentially makes the pipeline less likely because of the implications of it. Just have a listen to what Mr. Hogan had to say.
This is a motion that's designed to provoke and to divide, and the Leader of the Opposition doesn't seem to care that the motion actually makes less likely the thing he says he wants, which is a pipeline. If it's a yes vote, it might look like we don't take seriously our requirement to consult with BC and First Nations. And if it's a no vote, it might look like we're not serious about the pipelines.
I mean, is that not the net effect of what this motion does?
If the motion has that effect, then what effect does the MOU have?
Well, but the MOU has a language about, you've pulled out one specific section of the MOU, like the part about, consulting and engaging with First Nations, consulting and engaging with the government of British Columbia. You mentioned Northern Gateway. I mean, that was approved in 2014, but overturned by the federal court in 2016 due to a failure to consult with Indigenous groups after the report approving it with the 209 conditions was released, right? The concern there is that if you vote yes now, it looks like you're short-circuiting the consultation process.
First of all, on Northern Gateway, it was sent back to Cabinet with gaps identified. It was a political decision by the Liberal government to veto Northern Gateway, and Mark Carney said he supported that. So
right, but the legal precedent of it being overturned.
There were options available to the government to fill in those gaps. The Liberals made a political decision not to proceed and to kill the project, and Mark Carney said he supported that. If our motion does what that Liberal MP said,
Corey Hogan,
then what does the MOU do? The MOU is signed by the Prime Minister, signed by the government of Alberta. So,
but there's more to the MOU than is in your motion.
Yes, but I just think on that level alone, that remark was ridiculous. What we're saying in this motion is the essence of this. The reason why Mark Carney went to Alberta to sign this MOU was not to build other things. It wasn't built. He didn't sign an MOU to get a ring road built around Calgary or to make some other infrastructure announcement. It was an MOU to get a pipeline built. So what we're just asking Liberal MPs is to clearly state, do you support that in principle? Nothing in our motion contradicts any other part of the MOU. We lifted it right from the MOU, including the language on consultations for Indigenous Canadians. That is the essence of the MOU. That is why everybody got together to sign it. If Liberals can't even bring themselves to vote yes on that, what kind of a message does that send Canadians?
Right, but you can appreciate the delicate politics of trying to do this with the opposition of the government of British Columbia, the opposition of the coastal First Nations as a group representing a lot of the nations there in BC. I mean, they're coming here tomorrow for this debate because they feel Minister Hodgson wasn't clear enough in meeting with them. And now you've suggested it's ridiculous, the concerns that it would look like you're short-circuiting the need for Indigenous consultation. I mean, I appreciate the politics you're doing here, but...
No. Just because a Liberal MP says it doesn't make it true. The idea that having a vote on an MOU that the Prime Minister himself signed, that the essence of which was to get a pipeline built, in any way undermines the ability to proceed, it's just laughable, just on face value. It's the Liberals that were being criticized for not doing proper consultations in advance of the MOU. So that's a problem that they have to explain.
No, I know, and I went through that with Minister Hodgson last week.
I think it's absolutely fair, after weeks of mixed messages and outright contradictions from the government, to bring the essence of the MOU, the point of the MOU, was to get a pipeline built, put that before all MPs so everybody can clearly state where they are. And as I said, all the other political parties are very clear on where they stand, and Canadians can judge them in the next election on their position. As of today, I can't tell you what the unified message of the Liberal Party is, because their MPs are all over the map.
But maybe there isn't a unified message of the Liberal Party is what I wonder, because...
I think that's for Canadians to know too.
Sure, well, I think Minister Guilbeault's resignation made that kind of clear, and what we've heard from some of the BC MPs, I think makes that kind of clear. I think the Cabinet, though, is... Eleanor Olszewski was here, the Cabinet Minister from Alberta, and I asked her directly, is this a government that is now fully committed to the idea of getting a pipeline? She said yes. So, I mean, I appreciate what's in the Prime Minister's book, and things are obviously very different, right now. But since the signing of the agreement with Daniel Smith, beyond highlighting the conditionality of the MOU, that it requires a proponent, it requires consultation and a route and these things, what is it that is unclear from the Cabinet's perspective?
Well, because even what you just said, there are conditions in the MOU.
Yeah.
No one denies that. What Mark Carney said is that the conditions in the MOU are necessary but not sufficient. What that means, if you actually just look at the meaning of the words themselves, that even if the government of Alberta does all of this, Mark Carney's still giving himself an out.
Do you see it that way, or do you mean that it's not
mean?
Sufficient until the government of Alberta does these other things? That's how I interpreted it, and getting the other partners potentially on board, or at least going through the consultation.
That's not what the words mean. I mean, if you want to sell me your house, and I say, okay, but on condition that you put a new coat of paint on the exterior and change the landscaping, and you say, okay, so if I do that, you'll buy the house? And I say, well, maybe not. So if you don't do it, I definitely won't buy the house. But if you do it, might not be enough.
Yeah, but that's a one-to-one transaction. This is a lot more complicated, right? So look, as a final point, representatives from the Coastal First Nations, the umbrella organization, and some of the nations that comprise it, they're going to be here tomorrow. Do the Conservatives plan to meet with them to find out their views on this? Because they obviously are a key player in all of this, as the preferred route, if the Northern Gateway route is resurrected, is right through their territory.
I'd be happy to meet with them. I would point out that if there's a failure to get buy-in at this stage around the MOU from Indigenous communities, everything I've read is that failure lies with the federal government for not doing that. I meet with First Nations community all the time who recognize that the path for prosperity for First Nations community is in natural resource and extraction. And for decades, we've extracted Canadian natural resources and energy out of the ground to the benefit of First Nations community, to the benefit of all Canadians, to the benefit of everybody who uses a hospital or drives on a paved road. These are good things for Canada at a time when we need to be diversifying our trade off of U.S. markets. And so our vote tomorrow is to basically show Canadians that where every party stands. A Conservative government would offer the people of Alberta, the people of Saskatchewan, the men and women who want to work in the energy sector, Atlantic Canadians in Newfoundland, who see these natural resource extractions as a way to lift up the quality of life for their people. Our message is, we're not going to create hoops and hurdles and special rules and special exemptions. I mean, think about the kind of economy that Mark Carney is building here. He's not setting level playing fields where all projects are treated equally, all companies are treated equally, all workers are treated equally. He's giving him the selective power of enforcement. That's a very, very dangerous road to go down.
That's what C5 was, and you guys voted for C5, right? Because it allows for these limited exemptions for national laws. I mean, this is a piece of legislation that passed with Conservative votes.
Look, our preference, our strong preference, is to remove the liberal legislation that now even Liberals admit unnecessarily blocked big projects. They have admitted that with the need for C5 and with their arguments in this MOU. What we're saying is, what we would do is repeal the bad legislation for everybody, not just the favored few that the Prime Minister picks. Right,
but I mean, none of that, just as a final point, gets around the need to properly consult with First Nations, right? This is still a central challenge here, and the Coastal First Nations support LNG. It's bitumen they don't support. That is still a central challenge. I mean, do you see a world where TMX just gets supercharged as a way to get more bitumen to the markets? Because David Eby is on board with that, and that's a much easier path than Northern Gateway.
There is well-established jurisprudence from court decisions on what proper consultation looks like, where the government can still proceed with a project. TMX is not the same as a deep water northern port, which opens up those lucrative Asian markets. Those U.S. tankers going down the coast off British Columbia have access to those markets. Canadians don't. We believe at this critical juncture where we need to be diversifying our trading partners, the government should be offering a clear and predictable path to get to a yes, not an MOU with extended timelines, with all kinds of conditions that even Liberals can't commit to supporting.
Okay, we got to leave it there. I've gone over time. Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer, we appreciate your time. The clock is ticking down to the end of this fall sitting of the House of Commons. The last sitting day on the parliamentary calendar is this Friday, but MPs could, and often do, vote to rise earlier than that. Now, before the break, the government hopes to pass its budget implementation bill, but it's currently stuck in debate, and it doesn't seem like there's any rush from opposition parties to support it. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are looking to put the Liberals in an uncomfortable position, using language from the government's own energy deal with Alberta to force MPs to vote on whether they support a new oil pipeline to British Columbia's coast.
Let's be clear about this motion. This is a motion that's designed to provoke and to divide, and the Leader of the Opposition doesn't seem to care that the motion actually makes less likely the thing he says he wants, which is a pipeline. If it's a yes vote, it might look like we don't take seriously our requirement to consult with BC and First Nations. And if it's a no vote, it might look like we're not serious about the pipelines. Both of those situations, either a yes or a no vote, makes the pipeline less likely. The Prime Minister is a serious man for a serious moment. The Leader of the Opposition is not, and he's playing political games, and he's jeopardizing Canada's economy.
Okay, so is Parliament headed into dysfunction with just a week until the holiday break? The Power Panel is here to talk about that and that pipeline vote. Vandana Cotter was an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Brad Levine is a former national campaign director for the NDP. Kate Harrison is a Conservative political analyst, and Rob Rousseau is the Canada correspondent for The Economist. Good to see you all. Kate, I want to start with you. We saw what Corey Hogan said there. Andrew Scheer was on the show earlier saying it's unclear if the Liberals actually support a pipeline. I mean, they lost Stephen Guilbeault. They signed a deal with Daniel Smith. Seems clear to me. What do you think the implications are of this vote tomorrow? Yeah, well,
it is hard for the Liberals to message voting on wording that is lifted straight from the MOU on the pipeline and an endorsement, yay or nay on that. It's difficult to message that as a political game. I think what the Conservatives are doing is, you know, exposing a pretty uncomfortable reality for the Liberals that not everybody is sure about whether or not the government is approaching this in the best way. And, you know, obviously you spoke about the departure of Stephen Guilbeault. We saw a letter on Friday from the Liberal MP for Honoré Mercier saying that he would have to do some more thorough consultation with his constituents to determine. He's the chair of
the Environmental Caucus, Eric St. Pierre.
That's right. So you see a lot of tension starting to brew, I think, in terms of how the government is going to come across this. And again, it's not to suggest that the path through consultation is not important. It's not to suggest that none of that shouldn't occur. It's simply just putting the question to caucus about whether or not they support something like this proceeding. Right. And so I do think that it will be challenging for the Liberals to have anything but a united front because, again, the MOU is predicated on a lot of that consultation that is required with First Nations and work with the province of BC in order to actually expedite development.
But on that point, if you vote yes for it now, before there's a proponent, before there's a route, before there's consultation, because I don't know if there's ever going to be sign-off if it's the northern route, I mean, does Corey Hogan have a point there that it could be a signal you're sending to the First Nations that what they have to say doesn't matter in advance?
Well, no, I would say no, because again, the MOU and projects proceeding is predicated on what happening exactly as you say. And so really it is an endorsement of what the Prime Minister would like to see as, from what I can tell, effectively government policy on the advancement of energy infrastructure projects. And it should not be a difficult question for Liberal caucus to answer.
So Vandana, where does this put the Liberals on this? Because clearly the caucus is not 100% behind this because caucus members have told me. But I think now Cabinet, with the recent exit, is 100% behind it. At least that's the impression I have. Where does this leave the Liberals?
I think non-binding motions, they're really just political communications tools. So I think that has a less impact on caucus unity in terms of like pulling them apart rather than a shift in policy. And I think actually that has a ability to bring caucus more together because they're going to vote against the opposition party, right? So I think they've been clear on that. So I think what the goal of this is to try to, you know, push through on any tensions there may be in caucus, try to put them in an uncomfortable position. But also, it's awkward for Mr. Poilievre. I mean, and I've been in opposition. How do you oppose something that your party and a lot of Canadians do support, right? So you're always trying to find a place of where maybe there's something missing there. So this is really effectively a political communications like toolkit for him. But I don't think it'll have any impact on the caucus itself.
Okay, but Brad, if they end up with a bunch of video of Liberals voting yes for a pipeline that they can play in the lower mainland of British Columbia and Quebec, and others voting no that you can play in Calgary and in Edmonton and Regina and so on, that's what this is really about tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The best opposition day motions are the ones that make the government caucus squirm. And I think this one is designed to do precisely that. We saw, even when Mark Miller was put into cabinet last week, we saw a very tepid support for a pipeline. He was asked, Catherine was filling in that day, and very tepid. And the whole day was talking about how difficult that this MOU was for some Liberals, particularly from BC, the Pacific Caucus, as well as Quebec. So this is going to do that. Now, the easy way, and I think Corey Hogan is right. I think that either way, one could interpret this. The easy thing for the Liberals to do, and when I say easy, I'm saying for me to say this Monday night, but not for them, is just to vote it down and say we're not going to play the Conservative games, and therefore they could let those folks on the backbenchers who don't necessarily want a pipeline get them off the hook. It happens quite often in opposition day motions where the government may agree in principle to what is being stated. They say we're not playing those Conservative games and we're going to vote it down. But I don't think it's going to have any impact after tomorrow night.
Rob, what do you think? I mean, how they vote on this, is it a big deal, a non-big deal? Is this just, I know it's shenanigans, but sometimes shenanigans have real meaning.
It's more than, I mean, it's smart politics. Is it smart policy, given what looms ahead of the country? What looms ahead of the country are widening fault lines, a referendum perhaps in the province of Alberta, a referendum looming in the province of Quebec. And so you would hope that it wasn't just pure politics, but it is. It's not necessarily bad politics, but I'm not sure it's the best politics. And I'm not sure if it's the most effective politics. It would be more effective if there was some sign that the Liberal government was dragging its feet, was not trying to follow through on this commitment. Like, if we were 6 months or a year from now, would this be effective politics? Perhaps. There may be an escape for the Liberals in that the Conservative motion, there's a key difference, says that their motion says that they would respect the duty to consult Indigenous peoples, whereas the MOU says that there would be early, consistent, and meaningful consultation with an Indigenous co-ownership with economic benefits. I think the Liberals could say it's not the same. It hasn't been lifted word for word. There is a critical difference there, and as a result, we're not going to support this.
Well, even if it was word for word, it's word for word of 1 or 2 paragraphs from like a 4 or 5 page document, right? So that's also
the motion is a political statement, whereas the other one is a comprehensive plan for a pipeline. So there is a way around it. Again, I would have hoped that, given what looms ahead of the country, that we would begin to take note of the potential fault lines and not try to make them wider. There's a fear that this one might be making some of those critical fault lines along the relationship with Indigenous people in particular wider.
Right. So Kate, on that, right? I mean, clearly this is a potential problem for the Liberals with the voting coalition of the Lower Mainland of British Columbia, you know, where a number of seats they won by narrow percentages that could slingshot back to the NDP. They would lose seats there. And then Quebec, the latest Léger poll has them tied with the Bloc Québécois. This is an issue that's problematic for them in both of those places, despite the top level polling numbers overall. But, you know, the Conservatives saying they don't know if the Prime Minister and the government is sincere on this, with letting Stephen Guilbeault go out the door, with having resignations from your Net Zero Advisory Committee, you know, with the fight you're now in potentially with David Eby, the frustration of the coastal First Nations, how does that not look like a government that wants a pipeline?
I think the government is making a gamble in terms of how this is going to play with voters, and I would say that they are not following the typical playbook in terms of what is, they're breaking a few eggs to make an omelet, for lack of a better word. And I think that they are hopeful that by the time the next election rolls around, because I think, as we've talked about on this show, this doesn't feel necessarily like a parliament built to last. And I think that they are hopeful that by the time the next election rolls around, voters will say, okay, we've seen you try to make moves to you know, get energy infrastructure built or bolster the economy, and we support that. Now, does that mean he keeps his same coalition together? Perhaps not. And if the NDP are successful, they can peel some of those votes away. If the Bloc are successful, they can peel some of those votes away. I think, though, we have to clarify the difference between the Prime Minister's intent and, again, beyond laying the groundwork and the conditions for this to proceed, this very specific proposal to proceed, he's not actually changing anything related to the tanker ban beyond this specific proposal and the clean energy regulations beyond the specific proposal. So there's some additional...
It's a whole carve-out for Alberta on clean energy regulations. The emissions cap is dead.
A lot of, but the foundational and systemic challenges to getting any energy infrastructure built are addressed through this particular MOU as it relates to the pipeline, not necessarily other energy infrastructure projects. And my point in bringing that up is that the Conservatives have some additional ammunition in terms of how real or not the Prime Minister's motivation is. I think it's clear that he would like a proponent to come forward and support this, but at the same time, he hasn't gone the full level of bolstering energy infrastructure projects across the country by eliminating some of those barriers beyond the parameters of this specific MOU.
So, Vandana, without a proponent, without a route, without a project, without the process, I don't know how you do everything. But the Prime Minister set the goal of doubling non-U.S. exports over the next 10 years. He's restarted trade talks with India. There's talk of a visit to China. This seems like a heck of a way to hit your GDP export targets, a bitumen pipeline to the coast on top of the LNG. I mean, do you have any doubts that this government and this Prime Minister wants to get a pipeline to the coast of BC?
I have no doubts. I think the Prime Minister is betting on a pipeline. I think he feels that Canadians, even if, there will be some people who feel fundamentally uncomfortable with it, but I think for the most part, given what's happened in the world, given what's happening with Donald Trump and the U.S. administration, that this is the time that he has social license to put this forward. I think he also is smart to say, yes, but we need a proponent. I think it's smart for him not to say, I'm going to come in and fund one, but we need other partners. And I think he feels that by betting on clean energy projects, that offset might just be enough to assuage people who are concerned, but still understand that we might just have to do this right now. So I'm quite confident he wants to do that. I think, does he have red lines when it comes to climate? Absolutely. But I think in this economy, I think he feels that there's enough leeway there that people feel comfortable enough with what he has in place for climate change in terms of trying to offset some of those carbon emissions. But at the same time, I think he's put all the pieces together to try to find the clearest pathway forward to get the pipeline.
Okay, so Brad, case closed, cancel the vote tomorrow, it's all good? I mean, how do you view it? Do you have doubts about what Mark Carney wants here? Because I talked to him, not him, but Tim Hodgson. It seems pretty clear this is what they want to do. Yeah.
Listen, I'm not going to accept the Conservative Party's frame on the Prime Minister. The guy just signed this thing, 10 days ago, and 10 days later, the first opportunity for an opposition day motion, they're saying he didn't really mean it. It's like, the motion will. If the motion fails, I don't think people are going to say, I'm suspect. The reason why I say that is because he has, whether he calculated in advance or not, he has accepted that there was drawbacks to doing this by signing this MOU he took a hit from his reputation on the environment. He lost Stephen Guilbeault. You don't do all of that when your heart's not into it. I just don't buy the frame. They need something to go against Carney on. And they could have gone on affordability tomorrow. They could have gone on a number of other things, but they decided to go on whether or not we could twist the backbenches of the Liberal caucus to see if some of them will squirm. And I'm sure that some of them have been squirming. But Corey Hogan said it, the motion either way doesn't really make it. And if it fails tomorrow, no Canadian is going to go, I now don't see it. Because opposition day motions are relatively meaningless in terms of the substantiveness. They're great on comms, and that's why the whole first segment is dedicated to this question of the Conservatives putting it in the minds of Canadians. Is he really meaning a pipeline or not? There's no question. He's got problems in Quebec, and he's got problems in BC, and he lost Guilbeault, and he's lost credibility on his environmental bona fides. I think he's pretty serious about building a pipeline.
Okay. But if you accept that the memorandum of understanding is indeed just that, it's an MOU. It's not a proponent. It's not really even a specific proposal. In fact, I would argue it is very much about communicating to Canadians that there is perhaps an openness from this government to look at this more seriously. Then by that same extension, you should have no problem supporting a motion that lifts words directly from the MOU, which is not, again, a specific proponent or pipeline proposal specifically, and support it. You have to consider as well the message that this sends to potential proponents. If the government is not willing to stand by a motion for the text that is in the MOU wording itself, what message does that send to proponents about how serious the government actually is?
As Rob pointed out, Go ahead, Vandana, very quick.
I don't think these motions actually penetrate through the Canadian public as much as we
Then it
think
should be an easy vote yes, Vandana. It should be an easy vote yes.
But I'm saying even in opposition in government, you don't often support the opposition's motions. That's just how it is. And I think it's
we were doing things
exactly
differently.
What Brad said.
I thought we were doing things differently. And just last week, the government...
One at a time. Go ahead.
It would be easy for them to say, we're not playing these games. We signed the MOU. We've been clear on pipelines.
Right. Well, and to Rob's point, the missing words, it's not words word for word, right? With Indigenous peoples co-ownership and economic benefits is not there, and neither is the phrase private sector constructed and financed pipelines. That is not there. So, look, if I say I'm quoting you word for word, I gotta be. And Rob, they're kind of not right now. So, if the argument is Mark Carney's doing this for show and he's not serious, he gets the political downside of rolling back his environmental policies without the economic upside of a pipeline. It seems like a poor bit of politics.
I think there's still plenty of time for somebody to screw this up.
Yes.
But I think that if you believe that, you better give them some time. Look, there have already been stumbles. Minister Hodgson made a stumble. He's acknowledged that he made a stumble. So is this going to definitely happen? No, nobody can say that. But what do we know for sure? There is something remarkable about this because, first of all, we got Alberta Conservatives and federal Liberals to agree on something. We now have the BC NDP Premier slackening his opposition to this. We have a Prime Minister who says it's necessary for Canada's prosperity. To me, it sounds like everybody is coming into the middle. The NDP is coming into the middle in British Columbia. The Premier of Alberta has come to the middle.
We'll see.
I know, but so far they've signaled that. Should that be encouraged? Yes, until they really screw it up. It probably should be encouraged. Let's give them time to screw it up if we're cynical. But if we're not, let's allow them to proceed.
No, but we want the screw up to happen now, Rob. That's the way it is in 2025. Everything must happen immediately. Look, that's a joke. I am not advocating for that. Okay, look.